Hey guys, I'm Metagrit. Welcome to my channel. As promised, I have an Ancient Gear deck profile for you guys today. I have been playtesting this deck for months. It's the only deck I've been playing for so long now. Put a lot of hours into making this deck as good as I can make it and really figuring out the best strategies for it. Disclaimer, this is not going to be the same type of deck as the aggro combo deck I showed off in one of my previous videos. This is a much slower build, and I think it's the best way to play Ancient Gears. This deck is a really powerful rogue deck, and it can beat tier limits and sprites extremely easily. It can also lose to decks that are subpar, so you can take that for what it is, but I think in the hands of a good player, this deck can be extremely successful. So I want to just show you guys the basic cards in this deck that you need to play it, and why it's so good with these cards, and then that's probably only like a third of the deck. The rest of the cards in this deck are completely optional. I'll show you what I picked and why I picked them and how they synergize with the main strategy of this deck. But you guys are free to choose whatever cards you want you think I would go best with this deck. And it's extremely budget friendly. We don't play a lot of stable hand traps, so the deck is really affordable. And the extra deck is also extremely affordable. And by the way, this is a pure Ancient Gear deck. This isn't just a hodgepodge Earth Machine deck with some Ancient Gear names. It's the opposite. It's Ancient Gears with a couple machines that you can play or even not. They're all optional. What isn't optional though is these two cards right here. I played 2 copies of Ancient Gear Fusion, 2 copies of Ancient Gear Fortress, 3 copies. This card is the best card ever made in Yu-Gi-Oh! It lets you use any of your Ancient Gear cards, including your Fusion, and your opponent can't respond to it. So even if they have Omni Negates on the field, they can't respond to it as long as you have Ancient Gear Fortress on the field. And if it's destroyed by card effect, your Fortress, you get to special summon an Ancient Gear from your hand or graveyard. In addition to that, it's a continuous spell, so even if your opponent sort of negates this card when you play it, as long as it stays on the field, you'll be able to use its other effects that just stay there. It also has the effect that your opponent cannot target or destroy your Ancient Gear monsters the turn that they are summoned. And the way I play this deck, you summon Ancient Gears on your opponent's turn and on your turn. So your opponent is just basically locked out of interrupting anything that you do when you have this card in the field. You absolutely want to see this in your hands every time you play. It's a going first deck, is how I play this deck anyway. And then I play 2 of the Fusion style because 3 can kind of brick if you have multiple copies of it in your hand, and it's also very searchable. So you don't necessarily have to see it in your hand every time. That's why I play it at 2. You don't want to play 1 because you'll definitely need to drag the game along if you want to win. So you need to be able to search it later on for follow-ups and whatnot. So 2 copies I think is perfect. But these cards are absolutely essential for my strategy. The monsters you need, I play 3 Gear Frame, 3 Wyvern, and 3 Hunting Hound. So, the reason I play these monsters, if you don't know what they do, this Wyvern searches any Ancient Gear card when it's summoned, but you can't set cards for the rest of the turn. So make sure you set your traps before you summon it. And then this guy isn't, these 2 don't have effects when they're summoned. You can activate their effects after they're summoned. You can discard a card for cost for Gear Frame, which is really relevant that he discards for cost. Even if he's negated, you can still discard a card from your hand. And search for an Ancient Gear spell or trap that mentions Ancient Gear Golem or Ancient Gear Golem himself. And then this guy is a walking poly, and when he's normal summoned, you burn your opponent for 600 life points of damage. The reason I play 3 copies of each of these monsters is because it's really easy to fusion summon into Ancient Gear Howitzer when you run 3 copies of each of this. 3 copies of each of these cards. And Howitzer is the most powerful card in this deck. And I'll show you guys why in a minute. But anyways, 3 copies of all those, absolutely essential. You want to be able to consistently summon Ancient Gear Howitzer every time. Then 3 other Ancient Gear monsters that you will always want to play. You want to play the Box, you want to play the Golem, you want to play Reactor Dragon. These cards saved my butt so many times, all 3 of them. Your Box basically is an extender. You add it to your hand with Wyvern or Ballista or something, and he will let you add Gear Frame to your hand in addition. So you basically get 2 cards. And then on your follow-up turn, you could summon this card and discard what you drew. And then you can search for Ancient Gear Fusion, and now you can use the box and the Gear Frame that you just added to your hand the previous turn or the same turn. And you have Ancient Gear Howitzer all over again. And then I play the Golem because he's searchable with Ancient Gear Frame, and sometimes you just get a really awkward hand, and so you need to be able to search another Ancient Gear monster. So you already have a fusion in hand, and you just only have 1 Gear Frame. You need another Ancient Gear, so you can then normal summon your Ancient Gear Frame and then discard a card to search for your Golem. That way you have 2 Ancient Gear monsters in your hand and field combined, so that you can use your Ancient Gear Fusion. 1 Reactor Dragon. You want to summon this off of the effect of Howitzer most of the time. If your opponent is playing something like Tier Limits, they will often do a lot of things in the battle phase and try to destroy you, and they will probably successfully destroy all your monsters that have less than 3,000 attack, but they can't destroy something that has 3,000 or more attack, at least with actual battle. They'll have to use a card effect to get rid of it. But of course, if you have Ancient Gear Fortress on the field, they won't be able to destroy this with card effects the turn it's summoned. And so on your opponent's turn, they destroy your Howitzer in the battle phase because they have to. You summon this card and you have Fortress on the field. They can't destroy it, they can't swing over it. At least Tier Limits can't. So he can really win games for you. Those are the Ancient Gear monsters and the spells we play. That's all you need to use this deck's strategy effectively, because all you care about is summoning this card with this deck. I mean, it's not all you care about. The reason you care about it so much, though, is because this guy floats into any of your Ancient Gear monsters from your deck when it's destroyed by battle, and it's unaffected by card effects. So they're going to have to destroy it by battle unless they have a kaiju or something. But on to the cards I play to support this main strategy. I play 2 Ancient Gear Catapult, 2 Gear Frame, 2 Gear Town, and I'll save these cards for later. Gear Town, you all know what it does. When it's destroyed, you can summon an Ancient Gear card from anywhere. Ancient Gear Catapult is really strong. It can also summon an Ancient Gear from anywhere, ignoring that card's summoning conditions. But in order to play it, you have to destroy a face-up card you control, and you can't control any monsters. So you have to essentially destroy a continuous spell or trap or a field spell. And so this deck plays some other field spells so that you can utilize this card really good. It's a good going first card. But its other effect is you can banish it from the graveyard to pop up any card on the field and summon an Ancient Gear token. That's a really strong effect. Sometimes you'll want to normal summon your Ancient Gear Frame and then just discard this as cost for Gear Frame's effect. And that's really powerful because you can control monsters and use this card's second effect. But you can only use 1 effect per turn. So you can either destroy a face-up spell you control or banish it from the graveyard. But obviously this deck plays really slow. And so what you're able to do is use its first effect on your first turn, and then follow up. You can have its other effect in the graveyard if need be. But the other field spells that we play, 1 copy of Mystic Mind. People will complain if they see you playing this card because everybody hates it. I think it's a fair card personally, but if you don't want to play it, you don't really need to. It's not necessary in this deck at all. It's just an option. 2 copies of Therion Coliseum. This card's really cool because you can, once per turn, send a Therion card from your deck to the graveyard to prevent one of your monsters from getting destroyed in the battle phase. So you essentially force your opponent to use 2 monsters to just destroy your Howitzer in the battle phase. It also lets you search for Therion King Regulus or other Therion cards. I play Therion King Regulus because of his Omni Negate. I don't really need it though. I really just need other Therion cards to send to the graveyard. So if you don't want to pay the money to get King Regulus, get any of the generic Therion cards and just send them to the graveyard so you can use this guy to protect your monsters in the battle phase. Mystic Mind needs no introduction. You basically, if you only have Howitzer on the field and your opponent has lots of monsters on the field, you can activate this, and then you can burn your opponents for 1,000 points of life, 1,000 damage every turn. next package I play. This is really cool. So I play a couple Machina Overdrive and then Machina Citadel and Fortress. The Fortress is just there in case I have this in my hand, but I still want to play with my Machina Citadel, or sorry, my Machina Overdrive. So Overdrive lets you target a machine you control and destroy it in order to special summon a Machina from your deck. It's really good because Machina Citadel has a quick effect where you can pop a machine monster and destroy as many monsters your opponent controls with attack equal to or less than the card you destroyed. So you essentially can activate this on your opponent's turn, pull out your Machina Citadel, and then nuke your opponent's board, because he has 3,000 attack. And then he can also come back once an Earth Machine is destroyed, which happens a lot because you summon Howitzer and he has to be destroyed by battle. He can't be banished, he can't be sent to the graveyard, he has to be destroyed by battle. And so your Machina Citadel will trigger when you lose your Howitzer, and your Howitzer also has an effect that'll trigger when you get sent to the graveyard when he loses in battle. So you can essentially chain link 1, chain link 2 to chain block your Citadel, and then your Howitzer's effect is usually protected by Ancient Gear Fortress anyway, so you get 2 free summons. But the reason that this card is really good in this deck, though, is that you don't actually destroy that one monster that you control in order to use its effect if that card you're targeting is Ancient Gear Howitzer, because Ancient Gear Howitzer is unaffected by cards' effects, yours and your opponent's. So you get to use this card to summon your Machina from your deck for free. You don't have to destroy your monster. And of course, its other effect is really good. You can shuffle back banished machines you control, shuffle back banished machines or machines in your graveyard. You have to shuffle 3 back into your deck, and then you can draw a card. So really strong. You can also, if you need to, use your Machina Fortress to pop your one card in your opponent's back row. You just summon it and then ram it into one of your opponent's bigger monsters, so that so you can trigger its effect to destroy any card. Summon limit. This card works really well with this deck because you summon twice on your opponent's turn, and you usually end up summoning twice in order to summon Howitzer on your own turn. So you never need to summon more than once. Or sorry, you never need to summon more than twice. So summon limit is really good in this deck. I would say it's actually optimal in this deck. 2 infinite impermanents. You could play 2 goes in match, 2 rivalry of the warlords, doesn't matter. I picked infinite impermanents because it also works. If my opponent makes me go second, then I can play it on my opponent's turn. If need be. Also, it can get rid of pesky floodgates, like monsters that are floodgates that, there's monsters that negate all spell cards in the field. So you could use this to negate that, so you can use your cards. 1 metaverse. I play this for the Mystic Mine, but it's also relevant because it can search out any of your gear towns and your Therion Disc Coliseum. So it's just a good card. And then 1 Torrential Tribute. Once again, this card won't affect your Howitzer, so you can use this to destroy all your opponent's monsters. Usually you'd have to destroy your own, but in this case you don't. You could also use it to destroy a lesser Ancient Gear card you control to trigger Machina Citadel if you wanted. I've never done that before, but I mainly just use this to destroy my opponent's board when I have Howitzer on the field, and my Howitzer just stays on the field. You could play multiple copies of this. This card's really good. Okay, you could put it up to 3 if you don't want 2 imperms. Yeah, I'll let you guys decide if you want to do that or not. And then we play 1 Ash Blossom. You could play Effect Veiler, you could play whatever you want. I picked Ash because if I know my opponent is searching for a spell trap removal card, I can Ash that search. That way I can protect my Ancient Gear Fortress, which is your most important card. 2 Therion King Regulus for the Therion package. King Regulus is really optimal because he's an Earth Machine, he's easy to summon, and he's an Omni Negate. But I don't even think it comes out that much when I need another Earth Machine. I don't need another summon. I don't need an Omni Negate with this deck. Because this deck is just so selfish. It doesn't care what my opponent does. It just basically, yeah. I'll show you the basic board I try to set up with this deck, and so you guys can see it, and you'll see why you don't need to negate anything your opponent does with this deck. But yeah, 2 of those. And then I have 3 1-ofs. Overload Fusion. don't play more than one copy of this, because if you get 2 of it in your hand, you'll probably never be able to use even one of them. But it's really cool to see this in your hand, because you know you can get the big bad Chaos Ancient Gear Giant out with it. 1 Called by the Grave. This card's really good. 1 Terraforming, just so I can have some options for if I need a particular field spell. I can pick which one I want. So yeah, that's the main deck. Now let's talk a little bit about the extra deck. Again, extremely affordable. If you have the Ancient Gear cards, you pretty much have everything you need. I play 2 Ballista. I hardly ever use Ballista ever. You could get away with playing 0. If you have 1 copy, that's also fine. 2 Chaos Ancient Gear Giants. This card is unstoppable if you get him into the battle phase. Your opponent can't activate monster effects, and it's unaffected by spell and trap effects all the time. It can attack all your opponent's monsters once each, and it inflicts piercing battle damage. So, really insane. These 2 guys, 1 Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem, and 1 Ancient Gear Megaton Golem. I don't ever summon these guys, but they're there if you need them. Believe they have piercing. But yeah, this floats into this guy. This one's a lot easier to summon. It just needs 3 Ancient Gear monsters. Could be any monster. This guy requires Ancient Gear Golem, but since we only play 1, we can't hard summon it, so usually we just float into it with the Megaton. And that's just fine. And all these cards I don't really summon all that often. And I'll even show you the rest of my extra deck. I play a Cleafort Genius. Cool card. Underworld Goddess. Cool card. Yugioh, he can double Chaos Ancient Gear Giant's attack. Some other rank 4s, Abyss Dweller, Tornado Dragon. I played number 68, Sanafon, the Sky Prison. I don't summon any of these cards normally. Sometimes I do, in rare situations. It's nice to have. I'll say this: it's nice to have the Chaos and Ballista if the matchup provokes either of these cards. But the best card in your extra deck is Ancient Gear Howitzer. This card is bonkers. This card just does not care what your opponent does. It's unaffected by other cards' effects, which is already insane. But not only that, it floats into any of your Ancient Gear cards when it's destroyed by battle. And it has to be destroyed by battle because it can't be destroyed any other time, or banished, or targeted, or negated. I could do an in-depth video about how this card interacts with cards like Skill Drain and Kaijus and whatnot, because it's not very straightforward, but I'll save that video for another day if you guys want me to. I play 3 copies of this card though. You can burn your opponents for 1,000 life points of damage, which is really great because it doesn't need to attack, it doesn't need to swing over anything. It just sits there in defense position normally and takes an attack and then summons another card. And like I said, if you have Ancient Gear Fortress on the field, you're golden because your opponent can't negate its effect where it special summons an Ancient Gear monster from your deck. They just can't respond to your Ancient Gear cards and effects. But yeah, that's it for the extra deck. And my side deck, 3 copies of Nibiru, 3 copies of Lightning Storm. It's basically like the spell and trap cards that I play that are board breakers. These are anti-summon cards is what they are. They're anti-monster cards. Obviously Lightning Storm can get rid of spells too, but they're just going second, right? So instead of summon limit, you play Nibiru, which shuts down your opponent's whole combo, but it's just made for going second instead of going first. If you don't want to afford Lightning Storm, there's an even better card in terms of getting rid of your opponent's monsters. Raigeki is really good, but Swords of Concealing Light change all your opponent's monsters to face down defense position, so they can't use their effects. Your opponent can't use them to link summon. And better yet, in defense position, you can summon, your Chaos Ancient Gear Giant, who inflicts piercing battle damage. So, yeah, Swords of Concealing Light combo really well with Chaos Ancient Gear Giants. They're kind of made to go together. So real quick, I'll show you guys the basic board that I built with this deck. And oh, by the way, if you want to get 2 tokens, you probably should do that. Ancient Gear token. It'll come up every now and then. Alright, so this is the board. Ready for this? I'm gonna pretend like you're me, so I'll summon Howitzer in defense position. And Ancient Gear Fortress. That's it. That's the board. This board beats most meta decks, and it's so easy to get out. The way it works is, it's pretty self-explanatory. Burn your opponent for 1,000 life points of damage. Okay. You let your opponent do their thing. If they don't have anything to get rid of Ancient Gear Fortress, then it's just going to sit there and protect all of your Ancient Gear cards and effects. If they destroy it, you get to summon a card. So normally people just leave it there because they don't understand how powerful it really is. This will get destroyed in the battle phase. He only has 1800 defense. Okay, so this dies, goes to the graveyard, whatever. Its effect activates, and then you get to special summon an Ancient Gear card. Again, this card can't be destroyed by card effects the turn it's summoned. It has to be destroyed by battle. And this is all because of Ancient Gear Fortress. So its effect will activate, and your opponent can't respond to it because of Ancient Gear Fortress. So what you do is you add Gearbox to your hand, then he'll add your frame to your hand, and then your opponent will probably destroy him in the battle phase as well. And then it'll be your turn. Maybe you take X amount of damage from your opponent. It's whatever. On your turn, normal summon Ancient Gear Frame. Can't be destroyed or targeted by card effects. And then the card you drew at the beginning of your turn, you discard, and then you search your deck for Ancient Gear Fusion. You activate Ancient Gear Fusion using your box in hand and your frame on field. Your opponent can't respond to Ancient Gear Fusion, can't negate it because of Ancient Gear Fortress. You use those cards to summon another Howitzer, and you burn your opponent for another 1,000 life points of damage. And this cycle will continue, and of course, you're not just going to have these 2 cards. You're going to have something to work with. Like, eventually you're going to draw a summon limit, or your Machina Overdrive. And with cards like this on the field supporting this basic play of Ancient Gear Fortress and Ancient Gear Howitzer, your opponent is going to be really struggling to come up with much of anything. And you'll basically not just be able to burn your opponent for 1,000 life points damage, you'll eventually be able to summon something like Machina Citadel. You'll be able to turn him to attack position, and you'll be able to attack your opponent. Your opponent will have only 5,000 life points by the time you actually attack, because you've been burning him with Howitzer every single turn. And the deck is really just a thorn in the side to any opponent that likes to summon a lot of monsters, that likes to combo off, which is almost every meta deck right now. Flounderies, tier limits, sprites, all these decks like to summon a lot and build impressive boards with monsters, sword souls. But this Ancient Gear deck does not care, because it's just one simple spell, one simple monster from your extra deck. And that's the basic strategy for this deck, and I've been having a lot of success with it. I have a 50% win ratio online, and I think the reason for that is mainly because I've been playing this deck suboptimally till just recently, and I also haven't mastered it yet. I have win conditions that I don't recognize in my hand, and so it's not the deck's fault, it's my fault that I lose some of my matches. So I think realistically this deck should win about 70% of the time, which is insane. Most people in playing the best decks in the world won't win 70% of their matches, just because you could draw a brick or you have a bad matchup. But because this deck doesn't care what the matchup is, it doesn't care what cards my opponent has, there's never really a bad matchup for it. It's almost always going to have the advantage because it's so selfish, and these 2 cards are really strong in tandem with each other. So yeah, I think that's it for this video, guys. I can, like I said, I can go in depth on how this guy interacts with other cards. I could show you the aggro version of Ancient Gears if you guys want to see that build. Please like and subscribe and share this video with your friends. I spent a lot of hours trying to get really good at this deck. I went to my locals and I went 2-1, which isn't great, but I definitely could have won the 2 games that I lost. And the game that I won was against tier limits. I was a good tier limit player. And the game I tied, I also could have won. I didn't realize that I could have burned my opponent for 1,000 points of life damage, and then time would have ran out and I could have won. But I just forgot. But anyways, all that aside, I spent a lot of time making this video, so I'd really appreciate it if you guys would share this with anybody who you think would be interested. And with that, I think I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, duel on.